Good Thursday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports for CLE. Hope you're having a great day. Thanks for joining us. So the Browns' 53-man roster, pretty well set. There might be some tweaks to the back end of it. Let's take a look at the offensive depth chart as it sits right now. And you see Deshaun Watson suspended. You look at it, and it's a little light in the wide receiver core. You got Cooper and Peoples-Jones, Schwartz and Woods as your two backups. You see David Bell the ahead of Demetric Felton as that slot receiver, the third wide receiver, and only two tight ends rather listed on that in David Njoku and Harrison Bryant. Really nice offensive line that appears to have some depth pieces at it as well. Let's welcome in Quincy Carrier. And Quincy, when you look at that, the line is a strength, but there are definitely some concerns.
Yeah, definitely the wide receiver depth has been a point of concern for a while now. It's going to be interesting to see what they do here. I have my eyes on a couple of things. Two things, really. How are they going to use David Njoku? And how are they planning on using Demetric Felton? I think those two things are going to be, how Kevin Stefanski is during this time of the year. He's a very secretive guy. He doesn't even want to tell you what he had for breakfast. Like, he's just not going to give away anything. And we know that when Demetric was in the offense last year, they used him a lot. We know that Josh Dobbs, he offers some, flexibility that you could probably use there. We know that David Njoku, they cleared out the whole tight end room for David Njoku and Harrison Bryant. Why is that, right? The Brian Windhurst thing, right? What's going on there, right? There are some things that tell me, okay, they moved Demetric to wide receiver for a reason. They did this for a reason. They made these moves for a specific reason. And we're going to find out when the season starts, because the offense always looks much different in the Kevin Stefanski era. And I think I'm finding out the more we live through Kevin Stefanski's off seasons, how little training camp means for his particular plan for the regular season.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, this is three surprises from the Browns' initial 53-man roster, Dog Pound Daily. Number 3, the depth at running back. Number 2, the lack of depth at tight end. And number 1, the lack of wide receivers. All right, Quincy, yeah, I'm with him there. But those three things add up to me and say they might very well be getting ready to play a lot of two running back sets.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because if they were going to run 2 running back sets, you would think they would probably keep more tight ends just because you're going to go through them a lot if you're going to have them in blocking sets like that. And you don't necessarily want to have a bunch of 2 running back sets with a quarterback who's not mobile. And Jacoby Brissett's not necessarily the most mobile guy in the world, because a lot of those plays you want to have a moving pocket for. So I don't know if we're going to see a lot of 22 personnel from when Jacoby Brissett's on the field. Now, there are some other ways you can get a more mobile quarterback on the field while you're still starting Jacoby Brissett, but I don't think necessarily it's going to be a staple of what we see from Jacoby Brissett.
Okay, that's fair enough. The other thing, though, keep in mind, you can start Kareem Hunt in that backfield and motion him out. They did a little bit of that when he first came back from the suspension, his first year here. So he's a guy that you can start in the backfield and kind of move him out. This is where you've been going with it. So you had mentioned that by claiming Kellen Mond, who they did, and by claiming Mond, they have to keep him on the 53-man roster as of now, because they didn't allow him to go through waivers, so they can't put him on the practice squad initially. So he is on the 53-man. It might mean that they plan on running some Josh Dobbs packages during the Deshaun Watson suspension. So take us through your thoughts there.
Yeah, so with Jacoby Brissett in there, he's not necessarily a similar type quarterback to Deshaun Watson, right? There's a lot of differences there. He's here more so because they feel like skill level-wise, he's a good enough to be a starting level quarterback for a period of time if you need it. So if that's the case, right, the guys that I think are probably going to be long-term backups to Deshaun would be a Josh Dobbs, somebody who mirrors his athletic ability, or a Kellen Mond. And I think what the ideal is going to be is, hey, when we get into the red zone, we're going to want to create as much confusion while still being able to run the ball as possible. How do you do that? With a lot of read option RPO plays, right? Where everybody is an option to run the ball in the backfield. That's when you could see some 22 personnel where they can run basically some triple option plays to get the ball in. Look, they're going to have to be creative to get the ball into the end zone when they get to the red zone this year, because they just don't have great personnel on that would suggest that the red zone is going to be easy for them, right? Like, there's no red zone killer. What they can do is run the ball when they get in those situations, but when you run the ball in the red zone, you got to create some confusion somewhere. You just can't run it up the middle and expect to win. And I think Josh Dobbs creates that flexibility. Also has the capability to obviously not run, pick it up and throw it, and maybe you can have some routes that way too. So I think that's where they could be leaning with this. You would keep 3 quarterbacks if that's the situation, because again, Josh Dobbs will be putting himself in harm's way. So there's a possibility he could get injured in the game, and then you're left with Jacoby Brissett, and that's it. You want to have a backup that's active if you're going to do that. Similar to how the Saints use Taysom Hill, right? They have like 3 guys active. One of them's technically a quarterback in Taysom, but they have Andy Dalton there as well to be the actual backup.
You had alluded to this as well with just Njoku and Harrison Bryant as tight ends. Do you see them splitting them out some? Those are both guys that probably run well enough. I'm trying to work around the lack of depth you have at wide receiver. They're going to get creative. I mean, they're going to have to, right? They're going to split David Njoku out wide a lot. They're probably going to have Harrison more in and have him work up the seam that way. And then they'll have Amari Cooper on one side, and then maybe it's David Bell. I think it's eventually going to end up being David Bell or Donovan Peoples-Jones there, and they feel good about that. I think we have to start looking at this as pass catchers instead of wide receivers and tight ends. When you look at it that way, I can see where they're coming from, where they think they're going to be able to create some flexibility with this. But yeah, it's going to be different. But I would also remind people, the Shanahan-style offense is not one that puts wide receivers on a pedestal. When this was run here in previous years, ran very well with Brian Hoyer in 2014 and Kyle Shanahan. I mean, they rolled out Taylor Gabriel, who was an undrafted guy that year, right, as one of the starting wide receivers. And that ended up turning out being a good thing for them in the long run. So I know things don't look great. There's not a lot of familiarity with that position, but I don't think necessarily familiarity is equating itself to bad, like a lot of people kind of usually jump to when they're not familiar with guys. All right, let's take a look at the defensive side of things now. Here's the depth chart as it sits right now on the 53. Yeah, Garrett and Clowney, I like that. Wright's intriguing. The linebacking core I'm okay with. I love the secondary. You get to Taven Bryant and Jordan Elliott, and Jordan Elliott has had a couple of really nice plays, flashed a little bit in the preseason. How concerned are you about the middle of that defensive line, and should we be concerned about the interior defensive line?
I'm fine with Taven Bryant and Jordan Elliott. I think Jordan Elliott's really showed a lot this training camp. I think he's improved greatly. I think he's going to be fine. Taven Bryant, he's going to be Taven Bryant, right? Which is, pretty forgettable. But, it's not going to be so bad that you remember it, right? And that's just, again, with the interior of this defensive line, when you have anchors like Miles and Jadeveon Clowney, the job of the defensive lineman is just to hold a gap and get out the way, right? It's kind of like when Michael Jordan has the ball, clear out and get out the way so Myles Garrett can get to the quarterback, or Jadeveon Clowney. That's all we need you to do. So that's why they don't put a lot of emphasis in that position, right? This is not a situation where they feel like they need pressure up the middle or they need guys to do that. They want pressure up the middle to just put Myles Garrett at 3-tech for a play. They want guys who just get out the way. And if they can get out the way, hold their spot, and not get pushed 5 yards off the line of scrimmage, I feel like they think that's okay. given what they have in the secondary, given what they have at linebacker, given what they have at edge.
Quincy Carrier and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we will take a dive into should we be concerned or how much should we be concerned about the preseason the Browns had. Sports4CLE, I'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier. Quincy, Browns won 1-2 in the preseason. Games weren't. There wasn't a lot of offense, really, to be honest about it. Josh Dobbs played pretty well, but how concerned should we be? I know you've addressed this on your show. Again, Quincy has his own show, YouTube. Quincy Carrier. Go search it; you'll find it. It's important to note, though, Nick Chubb didn't play. Kareem Hunt didn't play. Joel Bitonio didn't play. Amari Cooper didn't play. Do you expect the Browns' offense that we see to be drastically different than what we saw in the preseason?
I would, right? I mean, even last year when we had all those offensive problems, it looked different when it was that game that Case Keenum was out there, right? Remember when he was out there with like Dearness Johnson, and we were joking, it looked like a preseason game because it was on a Thursday at night. And, you know, when you don't have Nick Chubb, who's in the NFL top 100, Joe Bitonio, who's in the NFL top 100, Kareem Hunt, Amari Cooper, I mean, you can just see why this offense would look different. It causes a whole bunch of dominoes to not fall in place. So, yeah, they will be a different team. But it's important to note that this is not going to be an offensive football team. The strength of this team is on the defensive side. They're going to have to grind them out, early 2000s football, right? Like that's what the Browns are going to have to play to win games. You don't want anybody to get over 30. You don't want to get into shootouts. You're going to rely on your defense, and your offense's job is to make sure that they're not putting their defense in bad positions and hopefully score along the way, right? But that's the job. They are supplemental offense. So it's important that people understand this is not going to be an explosive offense. This is not going to be a team that leads the league in points per game. This is going to be a team that is going to grind it out on offense. A lot of long, slow, grindy possessions where you hope to score after 6 or 7 minutes. And maybe a lot of 3-4 minute possessions where you end up punting, but you killed a lot of time, right? It's not going to be the funnest offense in the world. That's not what these first 11 games are going to be about. It's going to be old school trestle ball, you know, and I think people should adjust their expectations because I feel like people are still thinking this is the Odell, Baker show in 2019 where we were going to just air it out. That's not what's happening this year. This is 3 yards in a cloud of dust football.
All right, Nick Chubb, I don't think many people would argue is biggest playmaker. Now, after that, who are the guys that you think are the biggest playmakers offensively for the Browns?
oh, it's going to have to be Cooper and Njoku who have to step up big time, right? You're going to have to be able to move the chains on third and medium, right? Because this is a team that's going to be, I mean, even as good as Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt are, they're probably going to be in their fair share of 3rd and 7s, 3rd and 6s. And in those short to medium situations, you're going to need your tight end to step up. You're going to need a guy like Amari Cooper as a Chris route runner to step up in those situations to keep those drives going. They're going to be absolutely critical. Those two need to play at a high level. If they do, this offense will be functional and good.
So the other thing would be, what can Kevin Stefanski do to help Jacoby Brissett? How do you put Jacoby Brissett in a position so that he can be the best version of what he is?
You have to make sure that you're not asking Jacoby Brissett to be anything other than Jacoby Brissett, right? That is the big thing. That's where quarterbacks get in trouble, is when they have to think or have to play like they're somebody that they're not. What I mean by this is Kevin has to do a good job making sure that he's going to get ahead of the sticks, right? No matter what. 3rd and 7 is better than 3rd and 12, right? So you got to get yourself ahead of the sticks. You cannot be behind the sticks at any point. Well, you can, obviously you're going to be behind the sticks at some point, but you cannot afford to be one of the most penalized teams in NFL. And how Kevin can help Jacoby with that and just be a better quarterback is by making things real easy in simple form, which is the Kevin Stefanski style. It's one of the most quarterback-friendly offenses in football, according to everybody who gets close to it. And that's one way. Another way that Kevin can help him is being creative, right? A lot of those tight end screens are real helpful. Halfback screens are helpful. Make it easy for Jacoby to get in a rhythm. Let him, have some of those easy completions, scheme him up for those things, and then, let him get the deep shots every once in a while, and I think you'll be all right.
Who do you think needs to have a big year? Other than obviously Nick Chubb, but who needs to have a big year for this offense to be good, to be what it can be?
Big year, I don't know if anybody outside of Chubb needs to have a big year, right? Like, I think it's like you want to see good years from David Njoku, and you want to see a career average year at least from Amari Cooper, which would be around 1,000 yards. Big, I don't know if anybody needs to have a big year around Jacoby Brissett, because I just don't think the burden on the offense is going to be something that, if you need somebody to have a big year on offense, it is basically my point. If you need somebody to have a big year on offense, you're in a lot of trouble, right? Because that means you're getting behind the sticks. That means you're penalized. And that means you're not doing what you have to, right? This should be a pretty uneventful offense if they do everything according to plan. If we're starting to talk about we need somebody outside of those two to have a big year, the plan is going awry.
All right, fans are upset with Anthony Schwartz. Again, Jacoby Brissett tried to get him the ball quite a bit, and it did not go well. He hasn't been good. I'm not ready to give up on him just yet. I'm also not ready to count on him to do something in a game that we got to have. How do you balance those two, and what are your thoughts on Anthony Schwartz?
Yeah, it's kind of why NFL needs a developmental league, right? So you could do something with a guy like Anthony Schwartz. Fact is that if he's on the 53 at some point, he's going to be asked to play at wide receiver because he does nothing else, right? That's the problem with Anthony Schwartz right now is I would live with his faults as a wide receiver and kind of help him grow if he could return kicks or if he could return punts or if he could do end arounds, right? Like if his problem was just the route running or his problem was just the catching or his problem was just the speed, there is something that you can do with all of that if those are individual issues. The problem is that there's problems with a bunch of things, and it's like if Anthony Schwartz is not out there playing receiver, what exactly is Anthony Schwartz doing for this football team other than developing, right? That's the issue that the Browns have is you have a guy who's on the roster that you want to develop that can do nothing right now, right? Like a lot of guys can do stuff while they develop. He can't. And that's the issue, right? So hopefully they have enough health in that wide receiving room to where it doesn't come to that. And that's really all you could do is just hope you're healthy enough to hide him on this roster because that's really what they're trying to do is hide him and hope he develops.
And again, the thought is at some point, if he catches a couple of deep balls, he becomes he is the guy that opens the speed, opens the eyes of the defense because of his speed, but he has to catch the football.
Yeah, and catching the football, it's the ultimate tease, right? You can do everything that you need to do at wide receiver except catch the ball. Remember Greg Little? He was the king of that. Great route runner, crisp, fast, big, strong dude. When the ball touches his hands, it never goes in his gloves, right? Like it always bounces. And that's the ultimate, most frustrating player on a football team. So, yeah, and then look, I don't want to sound rude here or mean about Anthony Schwartz, but the reality is the catching the football stuff, that's what pops out the fans right now because it's obvious in these preseason games. It's not necessarily the only thing wrong, right? And that's the thing. If catching the football was the only problem with Anthony Schwartz, I could live with that because you can do things to just get him the ball in low and high percentage situations to where, hey, catch it and run, right? Percy Harvin, not the greatest catcher of the football. They found ways to get him the ball, right? But he doesn't do well with end rounds, right? So the thing you would do to adjust for that, you can't really adjust for because he's also not good at that. And that's why I say he is a prime case for why the NFL needs a developmental league, because a guy like Anthony Schwartz, who has all the talent in the world, he just needs to learn football for another 2 years before he's ready to have a spot on a roster. But since he was drafted so early, he's going to maintain a spot, even though, unless he could tackle, he's basically useless.
Quincy Carrier and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, where do the Browns rank in terms of the average age of their 53-man roster? Take a look at that. Sports4CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Maybe cliche, but there's no I in team. The only identity that matters is we. The collective effort to love thy neighbor is needed now more than ever. The responsibility behind pronouns such as I, me, and mine impact we, us, and ours. So understand that you make all the difference in the team. He, him, her, or she can't disturb our peace, since we control our destiny as student athletes. This is the power of pronouns.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery, Partners in Education, where stars shine.
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier. So this is from Spot Track, salary cap and age management group. And take a look. The oldest 53-man rosters in the NFL. Buccaneers. Well, heck, Tom Brady's darn near 50, so he skews that really old. But Buccaneers, Patriots, Saints, Cardinals, Bills are the oldest. Browns' second youngest, along with the Cowboys, which was a little bit of a surprise, to the Lions. Quincy, how much does that speak to how good of a position the Browns are in? And they have a lot of salary cap space as well. But second youngest 53 in the NFL.
Yeah, it tells you that they draft well, right? That this is not a disaster team and they're that young. I mean, remember when the Browns were that young, 2017, they were young, but they were bad, right? So, that's just a credit to the drafting over the last 3 years. Also, I find it funny, like the Patriots are in the top of that list. What would they be at if Tom Brady were still old? My goodness, like how old would that team be? But yeah, the Browns being that young, I mean, that means they drafted well. It means they've been able to develop players well. I think Jacoby Brissett even joked that since he's 29, everybody looks at him, he's a veteran, like he's the old guy in the room. He's 29. Another guy, Anthony Walker, I think he's like 26 or 27. People also look at him as an old guy in the room. So yeah, it's just interesting. There's not a lot of, I don't know who the oldest guy on the team is right now.
It's got to be Bitonio. It's got to be Joel Bitonio.
It's got to be Joel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Joel Bitonio is the oldest guy on the team. Think about that. But that's just, again, good drafting, good player development, good player retention. That happens.
Yeah, and for so many years, it was player development was kind of a knock. So they have started developing. Now they kind of got to move it around. I know, again, you've addressed this on your show. Again, Quincy Carrier, search it on YouTube, has his own show. Do you think they'll bring in any veteran players? Or I'm sure they put in some waiver claims. They were 13th. They didn't get them. Do you think they bring in some vets, trade or anything?
I don't think they do. I don't think they value the familiarity of a veteran player. And it's usually fans that value the familiarity of a over-the-hill veteran player more than anybody because they still have value in their name. But, yeah, to me, I just don't think they do that. That's not how they have operated ever, right? So I think the oldest guy they've ever signed was Malik Jackson at like 29 or 30, and that's it. So, I just looking and reading the tea leaves based on what this front office has done in years past, it wouldn't make sense for them to bring in somebody who's old because they act like 27 is like ancient on this team. So I don't think they would go and get anybody older.
All right, so our producers have told me Charlie Hewitt, the long snapper, is the oldest at 32, followed by Chris Hubbard, who is 31, and Joel Bitonio checks in at the third oldest at 30. So I wasn't thinking, the long snapper is the oldest. That's a job that, dads teach your kids to snap a football because you can make some money doing it.
That's got to be a 10-year career of just long snapping of football. Good on Charlie Hewitt. Is he the longest tenure Brown? Has he been here longer than Joel? I would think so at this point.
It's got to be pretty close, yeah. So, you know what, that good for them. Do you think they try to trade? Do you think the Browns try to make a trade to acquire either a younger wide receiver that they can? I'm trying to plug any holes offensively or defensively that you can. Do you think they explore a trade?
For better or worse, I think this is a front office that's confident in their work, right? And I feel like they're going into this confident that what they came into it was fine to begin with. And we've seen this with Andrew Berry, right? Where people are like, we need more of this. We need this. We're going to have to get this. And then this day comes around, waiver wire day comes around, and it's next to no noise, right? He's not a big tinkerer. He kind of believes in his plan that he sets out at the beginning of this process, and he is real strict about sticking to that plan. And that's just kind of how AB operates at this point, right? Like, he's not a guy who's going to make a lot of panic decisions. He's not a guy who's going to make a quick knee-jerk reaction decision. He trusts this process. He trusts who they drafted, and he trusts the coaching staff's ability to be able to develop these players eventually. We wanted Jordan Elliott gone last year. They kept him. We wanted all these guys gone. They believe in their development process, and they're going to stick to it. So that means draft picks are going to stay here a while. That's good news for Cade York, right? Who, he has the safety net of being able to have a couple of bad games and not feel like he's going to get released immediately. Because, again, this front office, they feel confident in their ability to draft and develop these players. And that means that they're going to stick with them throughout the long run. And that's what teams like Baltimore do. That's what teams like Pittsburgh do. That's what every team that's good at player development does. It's going to be frustrating because they're not going to give up on a player that you feel like they should be done with. But for every player like that, there will be a player that they can develop that, does come through. Like a Jordan Elliott. He looks like he's ready to actually be contributing this year.
So we mentioned earlier in the show, you think they're going to have to win via defense. Defense is going to have to get it done. Who are some of the guys, not named Myles Garrett, that have to come through for this defense to be as good as it should be?
Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah and Grant Delpit, I think, are going to be the two guys to watch. I think we know that Denzel and Greg are going to be really good. We know that most of the DBs are going to be pretty good there. What we are worried about is, the run, right, up the middle. How do you stop that? JOK plug holes up the middle. If he can do that, you'll be fine. Safety-wise, if Grant Delpit could be an impact player, the ceiling is the roof, right? It was what Michael Jordan said to UNC when they won the championship. The ceiling is the roof for this team defensively, because then you got like 5 ball hawks on the defense plus Myles Garrett. That would be like trying to thread a needle through a haystack while also that haystack's on fire and you're in the middle of it. Like that would be a really difficult defense to play in the NFL if they can accomplish those things. It's going to be hard. It's not a guarantee, but it's something that's within their grasp, right? And it's not going to take a Herculean effort from any of those players. It's just going to take them making a step.
Yeah, if you get that too, you'd have the playmakers at all 3 levels. You'd have Garrett, you'd have Owusu-Koramoah, second level, Delpit on that third level. And Delpit and JOK are going to be important in run support. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Absolutely. Yeah, they're going to be very, very important players. Delpit, and then if Delpit's good, that means you can roll down Ronnie Harrison more often so you can have more athleticism there. And let's be real. We got to play the Bengals and we got to play Lamar Jackson 2 times a year. And when you play the Bengals, they have those 3 wide receivers. You need to be as athletic and as flexible as possible, because not only do they have those 3 wide receivers, they also have a quarterback who's also kind of mobile, and Joe Burrow can move around the pocket a little bit. So you need guys who can clean up. And then, Lamar Jackson, what is there not to talk about? He's given this team problems since he's been drafted in 2018. He is a remarkably hard guy to tackle in the backfield. JOK last year, though, when he did play against Lamar Jackson, one of the few guys I've ever seen in the NFL be able to athletically keep up with Lamar Jackson, which is encouraging.
Quincy Carrier, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Quincy.
No problem, Dave. Thank you for having me.
All right, Quincy Carrier. Make sure you check out his show on YouTube as well. Go ahead and search Quincy Carrier. Good stuff as well. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We continue talking football. We turn our attention to college football. Ohio State Buckeyes getting it rolling in a couple of days this weekend. A top 5 battle as they'll face Notre Dame. Stephen Means joins us. The other side of the break, we're talking Ohio State football. Stay with us on Sports4CLE.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
Sports for CLE continues. We turn our attention to college football. The Ohio State Buckeyes, in a couple of days, will kick it off against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Buckeyes number 2 in the preseason polls. Notre Dame checks in at number 5. Let's welcome in Stephen Means, Buckeyes beat reporter for the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Stephen, so much for easing into things for the Buckeyes this year, huh?
Yeah, the last 2 years have been kind of interesting, right? Last year, C.J. Stroud never thrown a pass. He has to start his career off on the road on a Thursday night in a Big Ten game in the rain. And, you know, his reward this season is he gets a top 5 matchup, which is, I think this is the biggest season opener Ohio State's ever had. So starting off things with some fireworks before you get maybe to some more preseason games in the next 2 weeks.
When you look at Stroud and the camp he's had, how has he looked? And you hear plenty of buzz nationally about him.
Yeah, he looks fine. He looks stronger than he did a year ago. He looks like a real NFL quarterback at this point. I think the big thing with him is just, I mean, he threw for almost 4,500 yards last year while also missing probably the easiest stat padding game of the year against Akron and also playing 12 games. So if you just think, hey, if you just do what you did last year while also playing more games, I said he might throw for, you know, close to 5,500 yards and maybe have one of the greatest passing seasons we've ever seen when you combine what he is along with Jackson Smith-Njigba and the rest of that receiving core. But yeah, he should be the Heisman favorite and all those other things that are all the preseason accolades he's getting right now.
So you mentioned a couple of those guys. There's some loaded parts of this offense for the Ohio State Buckeyes. Who are you, in addition to Stroud, who are some of the guys you're anxious to see and get a look at a year bigger, a year stronger, and a year older?
Yeah, obviously, Jackson Smith-Njigba might be one of the best receivers in the country. Jordan Addison might have something to say about that, but you know, is he going to continue more of what he did last year where he basically had a record-breaking season even though he was the third option in that wide receiver room? What happens now that he's option number 1? But the guy I really have my eye on, and anybody who listens to our podcast, Buckeye Talk, knows this at this point, is Marvin Harrison Jr. And if that name sounds familiar, it's because he's the son of former Hall of Fame wide receiver from the Indianapolis Colts, Marvin Harrison Jr., except he's 4 inches taller than his dad. He's 15 pounds heavier than his dad, and he's a lot better of an athlete than his dad ever was. And so when you combine that with the Hall of Fame pedigree and the way some of these guys in the program have talked about his work ethic, could we see a similar thing that we've seen in the past with guys like Jamar Chase and Jackson Smith-Njigba when they go from basically doing absolutely nothing as true freshmen to sophomore year? They have these record-breaking years. Could he be en route for that? So I'd keep my eye out for him.
What about the running back position with Travion Henderson? Are you expecting him to build on what was a pretty good rookie season?
Yeah, he was okay. He was just all right there. I think what's interesting is he did what he did last year. What we have to remember is he hadn't played football in 2 years because he's from Virginia, who moved their 2020 season, which would have been his senior year of high school, to the spring, and he just decided to early enroll. So he hadn't played football in 2 years. So he just physically really wasn't ready to play college football, and yet he was so talented that it didn't matter that he went on to break Maurice Corrett's record for most touchdowns by a true freshman. And so, yeah, I think it's weird because Ohio State's such an elite passing offense. They have such elite wide receivers and such elite quarterbacks that Travion Henderson can just kind of be an afterthought. And he might have another elite record-breaking type of a year, but it just won't be the front of your mind because of everything that's going on through the air in Ohio State. But, yeah, continue to see him grow. But I think his big, Heisman Trophy statement year is going to be in 2023 when he's the focal point of this offense.
Are there any question marks on the offensive side of the football? Is there any reason for concern?
I mean, they don't throw the ball to the tight end, so it's like any concern you would have there kind of gets null and void because all they do is block. I think the only problem that could come up for this offense is on the offensive line if those tackles, DeJuan Jones and Paris Johnson, get hurt. This might be one of the best offensive lines in the country, the starting 5 at least, but they don't necessarily have the same depth they had last year when they were starting 4 tackles, along with having the benefit of Matthew Jones as a 6th guy who was rotating in. This year, the top guys are really good, and there's a lot of question marks about, okay, what if Paris Johnson gets nicked up in the game and has to come out? What if DeJuan Jones gets nicked up and has to come out? So, but you can't, I mean, this is football. Guys are going to get hurt, so you can't sit here and have a conversation about that. So as long as nobody has any severe injuries, I see no reason why this isn't the nation's best offense.
All right, let's flip sides of the ball. Defensively, who has stood out? Who are some of the guys that are going to be household names as we get the Buckeyes season rolling?
Yeah, we've heard a lot of good things about this defense and that it should be better than it's been the last 2 years. And it starts up front with the way that apparently this defensive line has been getting after the quarterback. You talk about Zach Harrison coming back for his 4th year, but I think the guys everybody has their eyes on are Jack Sawyer, the Ohio native, who has been basically baby Bosa since he was 14 years old, and then JT Tuimoloau, the other 5-star who's from Washington, who showed up here in July last year, basically a week before fall camp, and ended up having a real impact, which was already impressive. So what does he look like after he's gotten the chance to have a normal offseason of college football? When you talk about a program like Ohio State, where you're used to seeing those generational, once-in-a-lifetime edge rushers, they haven't had that the past 2 seasons, basically since Chase Young left. If there's anybody who's going to be that, it's going to be either Jack Sawyer or JT Tuimoloau, 2 former 5-stars coming into their own in year 2.
Talk about the linebacking core. What do you see there, and who are some names that we should listen out for?
Yeah, lot of depth. It's out of the upside is there, but the upside is young with a guy like C.J. Hicks. We'll see if he ends up getting into the mix, but it's been made clear to us that Steel Chambers and Tommy Eichenberg are your starting linebackers, and so that's who you should expect to see take the field against Notre Dame and basically get the prime of the snaps in that game, and maybe the rest of the season here, unless guys can make some moves. But behind those two, obviously Chip Trayanum, who is the Northeast Ohio native, who was a running back at Arizona State before transferring here and switching over to linebacker the way we saw Steel Chambers do last season. He and Cody Simon are probably their backups. But the guy I would say pay attention to, like I mentioned earlier, is C.J. Hicks. This is a 5-star linebacker who might have this type of superstar potential at that position we haven't seen since maybe Ryan Shazier. So is this a guy who, as the season goes on, we see him start to get more and more snaps as he learns more and more about how to play college football?
Let's go to that secondary. Usually pretty good. Who are the names this year?
I think the secondary has potential to be one of the best in the country. But everybody's got a hit. Obviously Cameron Brown is back, but can he get through a full season without having nicks and bruises? Denzel Burke, as a true freshman, doing what he did was impressive. Can he continue to build on that? You've got Jordan Hancock behind him, who is a sophomore now coming into his own, who might be able to pop this year the way I'm talking about JT and Jack on the defensive line. And then this is a safety-driven defense, and they've got 6 safeties that they can rely on at those 3 positions. You've got Lathan Ransom and Ronnie Hickman at the free safety, which they're calling the adjuster. You've got Josh Proctor and Court Williams at the bandit, which is the strong safety. And then at that nickel safety, that nickel corner spot, you've got Tanner McAllister, the Oklahoma State transfer, who he's basically the only guy who knows Jim Knowles' system in and out when he got here, because he spent the last 4 years of his career playing for Jim Knowles at Oklahoma State. And then behind him, you've got Cameron Martinez. So that secondary's got a lot of depth and a lot of upside as long as these guys hit.
Newcomers, some guys that you might not hear them early, but could really come on as the season goes along, that have been impressive.
Yeah, that list starts with Hicks, that 5-star freshman linebacker that I was talking about. But I'm also really interested to watch Tanner McAllister, because Ohio State hasn't necessarily missed on these plug-and-play transfer portal guys that they've gone and get. I don't know if you guys have heard of this kid named Justin Fields, but he was pretty decent during his career here. But they also went and got Jonah Jackson from Rutgers, who ended up being a starter here and is now, a starter and an all-pro guy for the Detroit Lions. Trey Sermon, started slow, but ended up going ridiculous in the Big Ten championship game and the playoff game against Clemson in 2020. They didn't really have that guy in 2021. But they've had a good track record of these plug-and-play transfer portal guys, and I'm wondering if Tanner McAllister can have that same type of impact, especially on a defense who's trying to kind of redeem itself from 2 lackluster years.
All right, areas of concern. A lot of it is expected of the Buckeyes. As mentioned, preseason number 2 in the country behind Alabama. What are the areas that could derail the Buckeyes this year from getting there?
Yeah, I'm not worried about the offense. They're going to score 40-plus points. They're going to have 450 yards per game. That's just what it is at this point. Ryan Day has established that Ohio State's going to have one of the best offenses in the country every single year. All the questions are on defense. The entire 2021 season was, this offense is awesome. Is the defense going to get in the way of that? And on multiple occasions, that answer was yes. we've heard Ryan Day come out and say that the expectation is top 10 defense. We've heard Jim Knowles combat that and say he should have said top 5. We've had players say, no, we need to be the top defense and top 3 and whatever. But the point of the matter is, we've heard a lot of good things about the defense, but now we've got to go see it. Now we've got to go actually see it and prove it on the field. And if this defense is actually better, then I feel a lot more comfortable about my prediction that Ohio State's going to win the national title this year. But if that's not the case, then we could see a similar version of last year where you go up against these teams where they like to run the ball, they can push around the line of scrimmage, and we could be talking about another 11-2 year.
All right, before I let you go, what have you sensed from Ryan Day leading up to the opener against Notre Dame?
Very serious type of vibe and then almost edgy. And I think last year kind of put that on him. He spent a lot of the first couple of years of his coaching career emphasizing the fact that at Ohio State you can't lose a game. Where this is the type of pressure we're under. All that, all the coach speak stuff, which is true. The Ohio State loses one game or even has one bad quarter, and fans are asking why the world is falling apart. But last year you lost to Oregon, you lost to Michigan, which is definitely a no-no. You didn't win the Big Ten title game, and you didn't make the playoffs. They didn't accomplish any of their goals last year. And so when you talk to him this year, it is a little bit more edgy. It is a little bit more, competitive in a combative way, but in a good way, because you see it rubbing off on these players where they're a lot more serious. He even said it when we got him on Tuesday, the idea of, there are no big heads. Even if the expectations are high here, this team has a lot to prove just because they didn't accomplish anything last year. So it's a different side of Ryan Day that I think we haven't seen, but going 11-2 and accomplishing none of those goals has brought that out.
All right, I lied. One more question. You alluded to it. You're expecting big things, so reiterate that for me. Expectations you have for Ohio State heading into this season.
Yeah, I picked them to win the national title. I picked Alabama to be the 1 seed. They're the 2 seed. Georgia's the 3 seed, and I picked Utah to be the 4 seed with Bama and Ohio State in the national title game. I think C.J. Stroud's going to win the Heisman Trophy. We have not seen the full power of the Ryan Day offense yet. I think we saw the passing side of it in 2018 with Dwayne Haskins. We saw the running part of it in 2019 and J.K. Dobbins. We probably would have seen it in 2020 had things been normal with Justin Fields and Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, but we kind of got robbed of that because, the world decided to all get sick. In 2021, I think CJ was young and coming into his own, and so while we saw it in moments, we didn't see it from day one, along with sometimes they couldn't run the ball. But this year, you've got so many pieces offensively, whether it's the running back, whether it's in Henderson, Stroud, or Jackson Smith-Njigba, the offensive line. If this defense is better, we might see what the best of the Ryan Day era is this season, especially on that offensive side with a second-year starting quarterback who might be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft in 6 months.
Stephen Means, Buckeyes beat reporter. You have me ready for the Buckeyes and Notre Dame Fighting Irish on Saturday. Great stuff as always. Thanks so much for the time, Stephen.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Stephen Means, make sure you check him out. Plain Dealer and cleveland.com, Buckeyes beat reporter. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, Anthony Castrovince joins us. We're talking Guardians, trying to stay in first place in the AL Central. Sports4CLE, we'll be right back. Stay with us.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking sports here on Sports4CLE. We turn our attention to the Cleveland Guardians, who are in first place as we begin the month of September. A little bit of a surprise, battling the White Sox for first in the AL Central. Battling the Twins, rather. White Sox have fallen off just a little bit. Let's welcome in Anthony Castrovince from MLB.com as well as the MLB Network. Anthony, is it fair to say Guardians are one of the surprises in Major League Baseball?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we knew this wasn't the strongest division in baseball necessarily, but the White Sox were clearly the front runners going into the year, the reigning division champs, and just a ton of talent on that roster. And then, if anything, you thought they might be challenged by the Twins just because the Twins went out and got Carlos Correa. They tried to improve their pitching staff, and they just had that air of aggressively pursuing their window to win. Whereas Cleveland, of course, famously quiet last offseason and very, very young. So, yeah, definitely a huge surprise.
What about the job Terry Francona has done? We mentioned how young they are, and, there are occasions where they do some things that I'm sure he wishes they wouldn't, but he seems to be the perfect guy because he's patient and he's firm, but doesn't go crazy when they don't do things the way he wants them to.
Yeah, and this has really been a consistency in his tenure. You go back to when he first came here to Cleveland, he could have had other bigger, more lucrative or just easier, quite frankly, opportunities, places where they spend a lot of money or had a clear amount of veteran talent or what have you. But, he has shown patience with young teams, I think, at various junctures here in Cleveland. Obviously, it turned out very fruitful in that 2016 to 2018 run that they had. And they could be turning the corner here again, because as good as this season looks, and the future looks even brighter because they have a ton of talent in their system still coming, a lot of high-end pitching talent that's at AA right now. So, things could get good here in a hurry. And like I said, they're probably ahead of schedule here in 2022, but you can never put a schedule on a young team that's well coached and plays the game right. They play good defense. They run the bases well. They put the ball in play. That's basically their recipe for success, and we've seen how successful that can be in today's game.
So the starting rotation probably a little spotty earlier in the season, but really has seemed to find a groove in July and certainly in August. Can they continue it, do you think, going into September?
I sure think so. We felt good about the rotation going into the year. Obviously, the complexion of that rotation has evolved quite a lot in the last several years with some major trades, but it's something where they have this pedigree in their system of being able to churn out quality arms. Now, this year, you go into the year, and I think the depth of those arms was a little more in question than some other years because they have tapped into it so much, and at some point the well starts to run a little bit dry. And as I said, their best impact minor league pitching is further down, and it is not immediately at the ready for the big league team. But they have certainly turned a corner in the second half. Shane Bieber has been really impressive all season because, of course, the first several months he's dealing with velocity decline. But I think he really showed, just his wily nature, how smart he is as a pitcher to kind of grind through that and still be able to get batters out. And now in the second half, he's starting to look like his old self again. Tristan McKenzie has grown by leaps and bounds in the past calendar year. Middle of 2021 was really struggling with his control, and he's really locked it in. So he's been great for them. You've seen good signs of late from Zach Plesac, Aaron Savali. So the starting rotation was supposed to be like the backbone if they were good. It wasn't the case in the first half, but here in the second half, it's really come to form, and I think that's helped the bullpen as well.
Yeah, and the one guy we didn't talk about in the starting rotation would be Cal Quantrill. You could make a case he's been the most consistent and really, was a guy that kind of bounced back and forth between bullpen rotation, but he's been putting together consistent starts.
Yeah, he really has. He has been a rock for them for several months now. And that's all you need. You just need quality innings. You don't necessarily need 3 high-end front-end type arms at the front of rotation. You need guys who can give you quality innings to take the pressure off the bullpen. I think the bullpen's been a real revelation of late. Emmanuel Clase has been great all season, of course. He's been an anchor for them, but there wasn't much consistency in front of him in the better part of the first 4 months or so of the season. But here in the second half, the last several weeks have been phenomenal for that bullpen, and that's as big a key as anything for them, leaping into first place the way they did.
I was one of the guys that was like, man, you really need a couple of bats to plug into this offense when I looked at it. How impressed have you been with some of the young guys that have come up and been ready to play? Guys like Quan. The one that really jumps out is Oscar Gonzalez. I'm not sure where he came from. I remember I was at the game where he made his major league debut, and I'm like, finally an outfielder that isn't 5'9", $185.
Yeah.
And he continued. He went on that DL, and that's when they went into a little bit of a backslide. He's come out and he's hitting again.
Yeah, he's been really important for them. You look at him, and he looks like he should be a pure home run hitter. But really, here at the big league level, he's hitting at all fields. He's had more doubles power. And yeah, he's been a huge lift to them for a team that's obviously going back many years has looked for stability in the outfield. And Quan and Gonzalez have really been huge for them this year. It seems like everybody they call up, is ready, is ready to contribute in some meaningful way right away. And the real theme that we've seen is just contact, just putting the ball in play. Like I said earlier, not a lot of power in this lineup. Franmil Reyes was supposed to be the biggest source of power this year, and that didn't work out particularly well. He's worked out pretty well for the Cubs since leaving Cleveland, but did not work out so well in Cleveland. And it's interesting because maybe a lineup just full of guys who are gritty and put the ball in play is better than having a lot of swing and miss and a lot of big home runs, because it keeps the pressure on the opposing pitcher and the opposing defense. I think we've seen that.
How impressed have you been with their double play combination and Rosario and Jimenez? Jimenez is a guy, I don't think people realize how young he is. When he was up with the Mets a couple years ago before the Indians traded, he was like 21. So he's still very young, and really, I think he's developing into a guy that's going to be among the elite in the American League.
Yeah, they both had, a decent amount of big league time with the Mets prior to the trade. Obviously, as you said, Jimenez was pretty young, so you don't know how much to read into that big league time. But they had the experience, and it was an open question, who would settle in at short, who would be more geared towards second or bouncing around the field. You just didn't know what that would look like. But here we are, a couple years later, and that trade for Lindor looks pretty good for the Guardians. Lindor is having a terrific season for the Mets. They're in first place. They're happy with him. But that was under the circumstances of arguably having waited too long to trade Lindor and the pandemic and the way that situation kind of unraveled on them. Cleveland did a really good job of that trade. They got an all-star shortstop in Jimenez. Rosario has been really a leader for them. One thing that's been a separator for this club within the AL Central is just the way they hustle, and I think Rosario has been as big a linchpin in that department as anybody.
Is Jimenez a guy that you think's just kind of scratching the surface offensively? There wasn't ever a question about his defense. He was a plus defensive infielder to begin with. He's taken it to another level offensively. Is that something that can be sustained, do you think?
Well, he's a perfect example of how you don't know how to project such a young team, because it's hard to project each individual player. Yes, we have our farm system rankings and prospect rankings, and we can grade out tools on the scouting scale and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, it's all about how they develop at the big league level. It's all about what they learn from the difficult times, how they respond to coaching, how the league adjusts to them, how they adjust back, all those things. And I think with him, he's exceeded any offensive projection, and that's a credit to him, and the work he's put into it. There's some things you can't really measure, and that's one thing, is just how much a guy wants it, how much heart he has, and I think he's shown this year he's a special player. We
talked a little bit about Quan. How impressed were you with Quan? He started off really strong, then he fell into a slump and kind of missed. They platooned him, pulled him out, but he's come back, and it's a contact guy. He is like the perfect leadoff hitter.
Yeah, and the slump was like the most unsurprising thing ever, because anytime a guy comes in the big leagues and starts rattling off these obscure, interesting and cool and impressive, but also very obscure records, like most pitches without a swing and miss, as he did at the beginning of the year, or most multi-hit games in your first X amount of games, whatever it was. He set these obscure marks, and you go, okay, well, he's probably going to come down to earth at some point. And he's so small, and just I think there's probably people throughout his whole baseball career who have thought the odds were stacked against him, but very Ichiro-like in terms of his approach. He gets the bat to the ball. It's really that simple. And he's a very smart young guy, and really has looked comfortable. Even amongst his struggles, he looked comfortable at the big league level from the very beginning. And I think what's underrated about him is the defense he's provided in left field. He could probably even provide you pretty good defense in center field with a longer look, but at left field, he's been elite in terms of his defense. That's made a big difference too.
All right. So when you look at this lineup and offensively, we've alluded to it. There isn't a lot of power. Do you think that's the next evolution? Do they try to get a power bat to kind of drop in there, or do they go against everything and just try to play it, keeping the ball in play?
I've learned not to know what to expect when it comes to external acquisitions, because they two opportunities to improve the team and last offseason and at the trade deadline they just stood pat, and both of those have turned out very defensible. But moving forward, obviously it's a very low payroll, it's a lot of youth, and that gives you the flexibility to do some things. And so if there was anywhere you would circle for them to potentially make a splash, it would be in the power bat department. But you do have to balance that against just the nature of this offense and what you want this offense to be. And as I said, they have a formula. It's not terribly dissimilar to what we saw from the Kansas City Royals during their back-to-back AL pennant runs, their World Series run in 2015, so 2014-2015 era of the Royals, where this is how they succeeded. They just slash and dash, basically. Just put the ball in play, run the bases like hell, and give the opponent a hard time. This looks a little like that. It could look even more like that in the future as these guys develop. Yeah,
and I guess the only thing you would question, and what are your thoughts on it, when you get to elite pitching, stringing together 3, 4, 5 hits to score a couple of runs, a lot of times it's hard to do. You're looking for that pitcher, that elite pitcher, to make one mistake that you can turn into a 3-run homer.
Yeah, so much, that's how so many postseason games are swung, is with one big swing of the bat. But we also see teams that are too oriented towards power, sometimes fall apart in the postseason. They're too strikeout prone and they just get carved up, and that big home run we're talking about never comes. So there's no one way to win in October. That's what it boils down to. There's no clear proven recipe. Otherwise, every team in baseball would be following that recipe. There's different ways to succeed, and some of it comes down to luck. If you are a high contact team, it's where you're putting it play, it's how the ball bounces, it's how good the opposing defense is. All those things kind of come together. But I do think about those Giants teams and those Royals teams in the mid 2010s, and how they succeeded with contact. That was their recipe. They were not big power teams, so it can be done.
Anthony Castrovince, as always, love talking baseball with you. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dave. See you.
Anthony Castrovince, make sure you read him. He is in MLB.com, national baseball writer, also on the MLB Network. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports4CLE. No show on Monday. We will be enjoying the Labor Day weekend, but we will see you tomorrow, Friday. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow on Sports4CLE.